Some calls end when you clear the scene. Some calls end when you finish the report. And then there are the calls that keep coming back. They don't come back on the radio. They come back in your sleep. In the last episode, we talked about the emotional baggage you carry. In this episode, we're talking about what happens after you finally close your eyes. Maybe this has happened to you. You're asleep, and suddenly you're back at that call. You can smell the smoke, hear the screaming, see the child's face, hear the radio traffic. Your heart is pounding before your eyes even open. And for a few seconds, you don't know whether you're in your bedroom or back at the scene. Then you realize it was just another dream. Or maybe it wasn't exactly the call. Maybe the people are different. The location is different. But somehow the feeling is exactly the same. If you have ever experienced that, I want you to know something right from the start. You are not the only one. I'm retired Sergeant Danny Coon, and this is Bulletproof First Responder, where first responders grow stronger in faith, steadier in mind, and unbreakable in purpose. You probably haven't told many people about the dreams. Maybe you figured everyone has them. Maybe you thought something was wrong with you. Maybe you were embarrassed. So you kept it to yourself. Here's what I want you to know. You're not losing your mind. You're not weak. And you're certainly not the only one. For first responders, the calls that come back are far more than bad dreams. They are often one of the earliest signs that your mind and body are still trying to process the trauma you carried home. Sometimes they're connected to a single horrific incident, but more often they are the result of years of cumulative trauma, one call layered on top of another until your brain finally demands your attention. Those nightmares just don't steal your sleep. They can make you dread going to bed, leaving you exhausted before your day even begins. They can keep your nervous system on high alert, making it feel like you're still on duty long after you've hung up your uniform. And over time, poor sleep doesn't stay in the bedroom. It follows into your marriage, your parenting, your decision-making, your faith, and your health. And because you work in high-stakes environments, respond to critical incidents, and live with chronic stress, you're at a much greater risk of sleep disruption, burnout, and trauma-related health problems than most people ever realize. In this episode, I'm going to tell you why some calls never seem to leave you, why your brain brings them back while you're asleep, what the science says about nightmares, sleep deprivation, and trauma, and most importantly, what you can do to reclaim the rest God designed for your body and your mind to have. Let's stop here for just a minute, because I want you to understand what's happening. If you've ever found yourself asking, why can't I just get over this? You're asking the wrong question. A better question is, what is my brain trying to do? For years, people thought when you fall asleep, your brain basically shut down for the night. Well, we know that's not true. While you're asleep, your brain is actually working overtime. It's organizing memories, sorting through emotions, repairing your body, resetting your nervous system. Think of it as your brain's overnight maintenance shift. Most nights, you don't even know what's happening, but trauma changes everything. Think about the calls you've handled over the years, the fatal crashes, the child deaths, the suicide, the medical calls that didn't end the way you hoped. When those calls happened, you did not have time to stop and ask yourself, how am I doing? You secured the scene, wrote the report, cleared the call, and then the radio went off again. That's what professionals do. The problem is your brain does not work on the same schedule as your shift. After years of repeated exposure to trauma, your nervous system starts carrying the job long after you've got home. If your nightmares are becoming more frequent, if you're afraid to go to sleep, if you are waking up exhausted, or if you feel like you're always on guard, even when you're safe, don't ignore that. Your body is trying to tell you something. Now, here's something that really caught my attention. Stanford suicidologist Dr. Rebecca Bernard has spent years studying the relationship between sleep and suicide. Her research found that poor sleep isn't just something that makes you tired. It's an independent warning sign that deserves to be taken seriously, showing that you have a greater chance of suicide. Think of that. We have asked, how you doing? But maybe we should start asking, how are you sleeping? because sometimes your sleep starts telling the story before your words ever do. Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman has been sounding the alarm about sleep deprivation for years. He points out that after about 18 hours without sleep, your judgment can be impaired to a level similar to someone who is legally intoxicated. Think about how many times you've worked at 16-hour shift, stayed late writing reports, worked mandatory overtime, had court the next morning, then drove home completely exhausted. Somewhere along the way, we've accepted fatigue as if it were part of the uniform. It isn't. Sleep deprivation affects your judgment, your patience, your reaction time, your emotional control, your relationships, and over time, your physical health, your mental health, and even your spiritual health. Here lies the encouraging part. Your brain was designed to heal. Your brain was designed to recover. Sometimes it simply needs the opportunity. Healing doesn't begin by pretending none of this happened. Healing begins the moment you stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What do I do to recover?" Okay, now let's talk about what happens after you fall asleep. You may think that when you close your eyes, your brain just shuts off for the night. It doesn't. In fact, there are times while you are sleeping when your brain is almost as active as it is when you're awake. One of those times is called REM sleep. REM stands for rapid eye movement, and it's during this stage of sleep that most of your dreaming takes place. It is your brain's overnight maintenance shift. All day long, your brain has been collecting information, conversations, decisions, emotions, memories. During the REM sleep, it starts sorting through all of it, deciding what gets filed away and what still needs attention. Most of that time, that process happens without you ever knowing it, but trauma changes things. You spent years responding to traumatic calls, leaving you with memories that your brain can't always file away as neatly as it does with everyday life. Those memories carry a different emotional weight. So instead of being tucked away like old files on a cabinet, they're more like papers scattered across the floor. Your brain keeps coming back to them, trying to make sense of something that never really had a chance to be processed in the first place. Remember when those calls happened? You didn't have time to stop and think about it. You had another report to write, another victim to help, another radio call waiting. Your shift kept moving, even if your mind hadn't caught up yet. So years later, when you're finally asleep, your brain may decide it's time to go back and finish a conversation you never had a chance to have. That is one reason those dreams can feel so real. Maybe you've noticed they're not always an exact replay of what happened. Sometimes the location is different. Sometimes the people are different. Sometimes it's a combination of several calls rolled into one. But the feeling, the fear, the helplessness, that's exactly the same. Your brain isn't producing a documentary. It's replaying emotions that were never fully put to rest. Why wasn't it the first fatal? Why wasn't it the 10th? Why does one child's face stay with you while another doesn't? Sometimes it isn't the call itself. Sometimes it's what the call touched inside you. Maybe it reminded you of your own son, your daughter, your brother. Maybe it happened on your birthday. Maybe it happened the week your dad died. We don't always choose which memories stay, but they almost always have a reason. Now, here's something that's important to understand. Those dreams aren't happening because you're weak. They are happening because you're healing, because you cared, because what you saw mattered, and because your brain is still trying to do the job it never had time to finish. The problem is, after you've had enough of those nights, you can actually become afraid to go to sleep. Maybe you've been there, staying up watching television. You scroll through your phone. You have another drink because you think it'll help you sleep. You volunteer for more overtime. Anything to avoid closing your eyes. But avoiding sleep doesn't solve the problem. It usually makes it worse. Without enough quality sleep, your body never fully recharges. Your emotions become harder to manage. Your patience gets shorter. Your stress level stays higher. And before long, you're running on exhaustion while your brain is still trying to process yesterday's trauma. It becomes a vicious cycle. The less you sleep, the harder it becomes to heal. And the harder it becomes to heal, the more difficult it is to sleep. That's why taking care of your sleep isn't always a luxury. It is survival. Not just for your career, but for your marriage, your family, your faith, and sometimes for your life. Remember, you can sleep for 8 hours and still not be at rest. Real rest begins when your body, your mind, and your soul all begin laying down the weight you've been carrying. Rest, real rest, not just sleep. The kind of rest that begins when you stop carrying everything by yourself. In chapter 4 of the book of Daniel, we learn that nightmares drove Nebuchadnezzar to madness, leading him to live like an animal in the wilderness until his mind was restored. Even in scripture, unprocessed torment in the night is treated as something real, something that can break a person down, and something that can be restored. You are not the first person to be tormented at night by what you've seen, and you won't be the last. But restoration was always part of the story too, not just the torment. Healing from this is not a betrayal of your service. It is what lets you keep serving and keep living without the job following you into every night for the rest of your life. God designed sleep to restore us, but trauma interrupts what God designed. That doesn't mean God abandoned you. It means that you are carrying burdens your body was never meant to carry by yourself. Psalm 4:8 says, "In peace I will lay down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." If you've been on the job for any time, safety is no longer something you feel automatically. Healing often involves helping the nervous system gradually relearn what the mind already knows. You are home. The shift is over. You don't have to stand watch tonight. So now, let's talk about something that's very difficult, but too important to ignore. If you have been having nightmares for weeks, months, maybe even years, I do not want you to brush them off as just bad dreams. They matter, not because the dream itself is dangerous, but because it may be telling you that your mind and body are carrying more than they can process. Research has found that chronic nightmares and poor sleep are closely connected with post-traumatic stress. They have also found something else that's gotten the attention of people who study suicide. People who struggle with persistent nightmares and severe sleep problems are more likely to have suicidal thoughts than people who sleep well, even after accounting for other factors like depression. Think about that. Sleep isn't just about feeling rested for tomorrow's shift. Sleep affects how you think, how you handle stress, how you regulate your emotions, how much hope you feel, how clearly you see tomorrow. Now, let me be very clear. Having nightmares does not mean you're suicidal. Most first responders who have nightmares will never attempt suicide. But if the nightmares are becoming more frequent, if you are afraid to go to sleep, if you are waking up exhausted every morning, if you are becoming more isolated, or starting to think, I can't keep doing this, those aren't symptoms to ignore. That is your check engine light. Because sometimes your sleep starts telling the story before you're ready to talk about it. And here's what I want you to remember. If your sleep is changing, if the nightmares are getting worse, if the weight feels heavier than it's ever been, don't carry that by yourself. Talk to someone. Talk to your spouse, to a trusted friend, to a peer. Talk to a chaplain, a counselor, or a coach. Asking for help does not mean you've lost a fight. It means you're refusing to fight alone. And if you have reached the point where you have begun thinking that the people you love would be better off without you, or you're thinking about hurting yourself, that is not something to keep to yourself. Reach out immediately to someone you trust, or contact emergency services or a crisis resource. Your life has value, even if you cannot feel it right now. For law enforcement and their employees and families, call Copline 1-800-COPLINE, 1-800-267-5463. One more time, 1-800-267-5463. For firefighters, medics, 911 call takers, and dispatchers, the Fire EMS helpline, 1-800-731-FIRE, 1-800-731-3473. One more time, 1-800-731-3473. Or you can call or text the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. And, of course, if you are in immediate danger, call 911. If this episode helped you, share it with someone you trust, your partner, your crew, your squad, your station, because this conversation needs to happen. Also, hit that like, follow, or subscribe button wherever you're listening so you won't miss what's coming next. And if this episode really meant something to you, leave a quick rating or review. That's how this message reaches those who need it. but aren't looking for you. I'm retired Sergeant Danny Coon, and this is Bulletproof First Responder. Stay safe, and remember, coming home whole matters because some calls don't stay at the scene.